So welcome to JAMB Biology 2027 preparation. In this series, we'll be solving standard biology questions, explaining the correct options and also learning why other options are wrong. So before we continue, please like, comment and share this video to your friends who are eager to learn. So subscribe to our YouTube channel and also turn on your notification so that anytime we post a new update, you will be notified. Thank you. So let's begin. The first question is, which organelle is known as the powerhouse of the cell? A. Ribosome. B. Golgi apparatus. Mitochondrion. D. Nucleus. So the correct option is mitochondrion. The correct option is mitochondrion. So mitochondrion is the powerhouse of the cell. It is the site where ATP is produced, which supplies energy to the body. Then the ribosome is not correct. It is not the powerhouse of the cell. The ribosome is the cell organelle that is responsible for protein synthesis. Then the Golgi apparatus. The Golgi apparatus transport materials through the cell. So the nucleus is the cell that regulates all other cell activity, cell organelles activity. So the nucleus also contains the genetic material. So the nucleus is not the answer. Golgi apparatus is not the answer. Ribosome is not the answer. The answer is mitochondrion. It is the powerhouse of the cell where ATP is released to the body, which is energy. Then the second question is, which of the following is the site of photosynthesis in a plant cell? A. Mitochondrion. B. Chloroplast. C. Nucleus. D. Vacuole. Which one do you think is the answer? So since you are preparing for JAMB, this is the tip you have to always remember. So why is mitochondrion not the answer? We know that mitochondrion is the powerhouse of the cell. Then the chloroplast is the site for photosynthesis in plant cell, which contains the chlorophyll that attracts the sunlight. Then the nucleus, I have explained the nucleus. Then the vacuole stores food, nutrients, water and all other things in the cell. That is the function of the vacuole. Then the nucleus is the cell organelle that controls other cells activity and also contains the genetic material. Then the third question says, which of the following structures controls the opening and closing of stomata in plants? Then the first option, epidermal cells, guide cells, parasite mesophyll cells, root hairs. The answer is guide cells. Before we continue, let's mark this. So the answer is guide cell. Why is guide cell the correct option? Guide cell is the part of this cell that controls the opening and closing of stomata in plants. The epidermal cells are cells that is found on the surface of leaf. So the parasite mesophyll cell is the main site where photosynthesis occurs because it contains so many chlorophyll. Then the epidermal cells is found on the surface of the leaf. Then the root hairs absorb water, nutrients and other things. So let's move over to question number 4. Question number 4, before we continue this, please like, comment. And number 4, which of the following blood vessels carries oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart? The answer is, before that, let's read the options. A. Aorta. B. Pulmonary artery. C. Pulmonary vein. D. Vena cava. So the answer is pulmonary vein. So why is aorta not the correct option? Why is pulmonary artery not the correct option? And one is vena cava not the correct option. So aorta carries blood from the heart to all parts of the body. Then pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. Then pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. So aorta, pulmonary artery, vena cava, None of them is the answer. The correct option is pulmonary vein. Then number 5. Which of the following is the main site of absorption of digested food in the human alimentary canal? A. Stomach. B. Small intestine. C. Large intestine. D. Esophagus. Supposed to know this answer. The answer is small intestine. Why small intestine the correct option? Because esophagus, let's start from esophagus, is the surface that transports food from the mouth to the stomach. Then esophagus is not the answer. Then large intestine is not the answer. Stomach stores food. Do you understand? This is where chemical digestion occurs, and small intestine is the site of absorption of digested food in the human alimentary canal because it has a large surface area. Then question number 6. Which of the following hormones regulates amount of glucose in the blood? A. Adrenaline. B. Insulin. C. Tyrosine. D. Testosterone. So the correct option is insulin. The correct option is insulin. Why? Adrenaline is an emergency hormone produced by or secreted by adrenal gland. It's an emergency hormone, just know that. Then tyrosine is secreted by thyroid gland. Do you understand? Then testosterone is the male hormone which is secreted by testes. Then insulin is the hormone that regulates the amount of glucose in the blood. Insulin is secreted by pancreas. Remember that insulin reduces the amount of glucose, while glucagon raises the amount of glucose. That is what you have to know. Then this tyrosine is a hormone that increases the metabolic rate of the body. Remember, it is a growth hormone. Just know it as a growth hormone. Then next question, which is question number 7. Which of the following process removes nitrogenous waste products from the human body? Then A. Digestion. B. Respiration. C. Excretion. D. Circulation. The correct option is excretion. Digestion is not the answer. You are supposed to know this. It's very simple. Digestion is not the answer. Respiration is not the answer. Circulation is not the answer. Circulation is the transport of food materials or nutrients through the body parts. Then digestion is breakdown of food. Next question. Which of the following structures is responsible for the exchange of gases in the lungs? A. Trachea. B. Bronchus. C. Alveolus. D. Diaphragm. The answer is alveolus. This question used to come out every year in JAMB. The answer is alveolus. Trachea is not the answer. Bronchus is not the answer. Alveolus is not the option. Then diaphragm is not the answer. If you want to understand about these parts of the lungs, the trachea, the alveolus, the bronchus, just wait for my next video. I will explain it. So subscribe and wait for the next episode.